So if you can find your seat, I know you know where you're sitting, and we can get going. I traveled around to each of those, and there were such lively conversations. I hope that, so part of the design, of the initiative, some of the design of the initiative is to get to know other congregations. And I know we have limited capacity to do that for you. But it warms my heart that when you do gather, that you're freely sharing with one another, both your successes as well as your challenges, because we can learn from one another. So now is a time I'll call by cohort, and what would you like? Why don't you pose the question, and we'll start with cohort A, your representative.
All right, so the question that I want you to respond to is share sort of what you were doing well, and then sort of share where you were challenged. And as a part of where you were challenged, I'd like to hear what the next steps are to address those challenges. So that.
I'd like to defer to cohort B. Okay, I will try my best. Good morning. Yeah. So what are we doing well? We felt like we pivoted very well to the online environments with Zoom engagements, utilization of Facebook, utilization of YouTube. We've done that very well. Additionally, our small groups have been very successful in gathering people in new ways to create a sense of belonging. Some focused around Lent, some focused around bereavement, and others focused around healing. What was the next question?
Where were you challenged?
Yes. Okay. So some of the ways that we were challenged are we have the same pool of volunteers, which makes our coalition of the willing tired. And ways we hope to address that is to not only approach our newcomers to ensure that they have a sense of belonging and what calls to them, but also to, I believe it was Anne Marie who said, let some of it die, right? Let some of the leadership who's been in charge of it for forever die. Let the new ideas come forward, right? Bring in new life to an old ministry and let it see where it can go. It will likely cause a more welcoming environment. Did I do everything?
You did.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. The comment on volunteers is one that is really common. It's a real struggle often for congregations, and particularly depending on your size, to find volunteers or people to step in and try to keep ministries going. So the idea of allowing some things to die certainly is important and can be very helpful. And the other thing to think about is sometimes we just think about people inside of the church, but depending on the ministry, there may actually be people in the community who are willing to help. So particularly if you're doing a ministry that benefits the community, you can often get individuals in the community to participate, and that can be another resource or pool of volunteers for you. So we got to expand the way we think about volunteers. We always just think inside, but depending on the ministry, there may actually be people in the community that would be willing to help out and support it, particularly if it's benefiting the community. The other resource that's important to remember is in this area, all junior high school students and all high school students have to do community engagement hours. And depending again on the ministry, many of the ministries that congregations do actually can count towards those community engagement hours. You just have to make sure you go through the appropriate channels. So take advantage of being able to engage the young people and get them engaged in the ministries. And you never know what may happen. That might be a way you build a relationship with somebody who could become a part of the church. So that's another place to connect. But absolutely perfect and right on target. All right?
Great. Another group B, cohort B.
Thank you. For us, connecting with others, we do well with outreach programs of many varieties that reach out into the community, whether sharing food or having activities at the church that welcome people from different ethnic groups. We also do well with providing children's ministry, making sure that our children had Sunday school or Christian teaching throughout the pandemic. A challenge for us and a blessing is having technology, the websites. And the challenge is keeping the website up to date and having people who are able to assist with technology. Because we've gone through the pandemic, we've had to learn how to use Facebook as well as the live stream, and to have people who will be able to do that, because that ministry is going to be vital moving forward. We can't go back. The other is for St. Nicholas, their location. They are located in an area where they don't have public transportation, and so that is a hindrance to connecting with others. And I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And just to pick up again, sort of on the one challenge of technology. Again, depending on one's congregation, that can certainly be a challenge, particularly if you don't have individuals who have been using that technology. But again, it is important to try and find ways, particularly for the website. And I think I overheard your group. I don't know who was talking, but they were commenting on that the website hadn't actually been updated, and Google Maps had a different time for when services started than when the actual service started. So someone showed up an hour early that was visiting. I mean, and this is why it's important to make sure these things are updated, because, you know, it could become a frustration for people when they think they're getting the right information, but it really is not the right information. So finding ways to make sure that you are communicating the accurate information, and communicating, again, thinking about the website is an evangelistic tool. You're communicating what you want others to know about your congregation, right? And the website is the first place they're going to encounter where they're going to find out what you want others to know. Where I am at Wesley, we're redoing our website now. Our website was horrible. I mean, I used to hate clicking on it myself because I could never figure out where anything was. You know, you're thinking, well, it should be here, but it wasn't there. So just make sure that the website is logical and that it's easy for people to sort of follow. And one way to do that is invite people who are not a part of your congregation to click on it and see if they can actually navigate through it in an easy manner. So again, use people who are outside of your congregation to sort of help you to navigate if that's the case. But thank you, great response.
I wanted to follow up on cohort A, one thought about, you know, engaging your neighbors. Now that a lot of us have used outdoor spaces, and I think I might have mentioned this at another learning lab, that St. David's in the Palisades, for instance, started just because of COVID, assembling their sandwiches so others might eat outdoors. And they went from so neighbors saw what they were doing and wanted to join in. And so they went from making 700 sandwiches on a Sunday morning to 2,000. There were families bringing their bread wagons down with their small children and their bread and meats and things like that. So the more you can, I know Christchurch, Washington Parish over the summer has a gather, or used to, if you still do, a Wednesday night grill. and it's just sort of popping in. That was my way in, actually, to that congregation. And the other thing I want to mention about websites, which I don't see a whole lot in Episcopal churches, but I do see in others, and I think it's something people are looking for, is what we believe. That is, if you don't have a what you believe page, I think you're going to have a miss. You'll have people saying, well, what are you hiding from me about what you believe? Do you really welcome me? But if we really are affirming and welcoming, having a page that says that, because young people today will look at that place to say, is this a place I can trust? Okay, so this is now C.
Good morning. All right, so our connectors were doing things for others, services, weddings, funerals. That seemed to do really well. Changing leadership often and empowering others to lead programs and trusting them to lead programs. And then, we also said that there are some superstar connectors within each of our parishes that really go above and beyond to make connections with the new folks that are showing up, which seems to be in all three of our groups happening more often than not. Challenges is prioritizing traditions makes things very restrictive for new people to get involved instead of kind of looking where God is leading us. Passing the torch isn't easy from committee to committee, so while we're, having great things with leadership changing, letting people create their own and using their own talents within each committee or ministry is difficult for the one actually doing the passing of the torch. And then, resources, money. These things do cost money, and resources to implement connections and changes is always a challenge, I'm sure, for all of us. For preparation for more discipleship, we just said nurturing new beginnings and the growing faith stage instead of just, welcome, join the vestry. Really taking the time to get to know each new parishioner or spiritually curious person and see where their talents and their needs are. Empowering leadership, and then really taking advantage of the talents that do walk through our door.
Thank you. Here I just really want to emphasize those individuals who can be connectors. And as you were talking, I was remembering when we were in Missouri, and my wife is a pastor, and she actually had to preach every Sunday, and we were at that point in time at different congregations. So I was taking my son, who was a baby, with me, and a couple of the older ladies in the congregation, I guess, thought I was helpless, so they adopted. They nicely adopted me, but they would, if I didn't show up a Sunday, they would call to check and make sure, that I was okay and the family was okay. And really sort of became a sort of grandparents to my son, where literally, they would be like, Rev, it's okay, we got him, you do what you need to do. So having those connecting people who really can help integrate someone in is priceless for your congregation. And these individuals didn't think about that's what they were doing, it just sort of came naturally to them. But having those individuals in your congregation really makes a huge difference. The challenge today, admittedly, is you not only need those people in person, but you need those same sort of people who can do it virtually and can make those same sort of connections. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier in talking about virtual is for your virtual community, for those individuals who may only be with you virtually, give them opportunities also to go deeper, either by having a time where the pastor may say, I'm going to do this sort of a pastor conversation one Sunday with the group that is virtual, or a time where, you know, if you want to have prayer or something, someone can just sort of have a conversation with you one-on-ones. But invite them also, and don't think of them just as coming strictly on Sunday during worship time, but give them opportunities to connect at other times also. I think that's critically important. Great, so thank you.
Cohort D. But not, right, who's speaking for cohort D, not the coach? Walter? Who would like to represent cohort D? Hands raised high. No one's checking about whether what you say is true. Here, Walter, why don't you begin?
I'll kick it off and give it to each different table. So we didn't have a rapporteur, so we'll have to sort of wing it here as much as we can. So at any rate, we got together, and a couple of things. I'm trying to think of all the things that stood out. A hint? Anything? I know what I said, so I'm trying to remember what other. Uh-huh. Yeah. Nils, there you go, yeah. I'll say my one point, which I was really struck by, but St. Timothy's has a Boy Scout group that meets in their church. And for me, I came from a non-religious family. That was my first introduction to church. And Boy Scout Sunday, I learned to read a hymn book. Instead of reading it straight, you'd have to jump. I didn't know that. And so I thought that was incredible exposure to it. And I thought that was just a great way to bring people into a church, is having services like that. But it was just fantastic. So that was something that stuck out. But Nils?
So I'm not sure how this worked out, but I think one of the commonalities was that each parish was able to adapt pretty quickly to COVID and use technology to continue to connect with parishioners and even expand and reach new people. Some of the parishes described what were really well-organized infrastructures in terms of their vestry interacting with families and families sponsoring, if I got this correctly, some of the programs that they have, really well organized. I think in speaking maybe directly about St. Dunstan's, one of the things that we are not doing as well right now is we have a very strong core base of people, but as we get back to in-person, getting organized and reaching the community to kind of bring them in, because I think we've done some very powerful outreach things that sort of stay out and have touched a lot of people and been great, but now as we're coiled and ready to get organized to try and reach out. And I think that's really the next step for us, is to try and bring the people into the church, and rather than just doing wonderful things outside. So I'll leave it at that.
Group D. Is that a good summary? You all are saying yes, absolutely. Good job, Niels and Walter.
Just a couple of comments. One is, many of our congregations are connected to other groups. And for some of our congregations, we often have a daycare or something that is a part of the congregation. And oftentimes they're renting space from us or something of that nature. But again, those are places where you can make connections if we're intentional about making sure that we are available to those individuals. Hosting coffee for the parents as they drop their kids off, hosting something for the scouts, sometime when they're using the space in our congregation. So people who are using our space that may not be a part of the congregation, being intentional about trying to connect with them, because again, that's a place where we can build relationships. And then the other piece was picking up of reaching out to the community. One of the things that is hard for congregations, I think, is really thinking about when we're reaching out, starting with the community and not starting with ourselves. And I'll give an example of, again, from a congregation I was a part of. At the congregation, we decided that, what would be great is if we put a playground on our property so the children would have a place to play. And, this was a great idea, and we were really gung-ho about going and doing this. But then, some had said, well, before we do that, though, shouldn't we go and actually see if there are other playgrounds that already exist in a community? And lo and behold, there were other playgrounds that were already there, so they didn't really need a playground. Actually, what was needed was a place for seniors in the community, right? But oftentimes in congregations, we start off in committees with what we think we should do, and that's how we move forward, instead of starting with the community and what is needed, and then trying to match that with what it is that we can help and minister to. So really work hard, I would say, on that piece of when you're thinking of things, really start with the community first, and not just simply sitting in a committee and saying, we're gung-ho, this is what we're going to do, because there might be a mismatch, and then we get frustrated because we'll say, well, no one showed up, and we put all this work into it, when the reality is no one showed up because you already had the resources there and they're going other places for that particular thing that is happening. All right, I think that is all of the groups.
Thank you very much, Douglas, for your wisdom, presentation. And thank you so much. You've teed us up well. I'll stand up here. For the afternoon, because an afternoon is our work session where we take what we learned from this morning and apply it to our own congregations. This will help your teams along the way. And we're about to move into lunch. Over lunch, I would like your teams to decide who will go. There's 3 different workshops in the afternoon. One is the 90-day micro strategies with Reverend Anne Marie Jeffrey, our canon for congregational vitality. That will be in this room. I would like to invite the rector and the team leader, at least those 2, just to stay in for that. And perhaps other people would stay also for the 90-day micro strategies, because that's the process that we're inviting you to use to get to your strategic goals for the year. The second choice is the deep dive into engagement for adults. That's with the Reverend Diana Gustafson, and that will be in the other building. That will help you. You'll learn about what St. Margaret's does to help people along their pathway of discipleship, and then it gives you an opportunity to think about your own congregation and what you could do there. And then the very same idea is for choice 3, but with young people, meaning children, youth, and children and youth, I think mostly. I bet the young adults will end up with Diana. And that will be with the Reverend Amanda Aches Cardwell, Missioner for Children, Youth, and Young Adults in the Diocese of Washington. So as you have lunch, just decide who's going to do which, and then when we conclude lunch, we'll give you more directions about how to get there. And we have a question? So the micro strategies will be recorded. The other 2, we don't have 3 people to record. But you can always call up Diana and Amanda for that information, but thank you. I also want to mention that on the back table, if you face the back to the left, I know we had these available at the last Learning Lab. There is a Path of Discipleship cards. Please take a few for your team to use in your congregation, as well as a description of how to use them, as well as actually the path of discipleship that had been discerned by a group of people from the Diocese of Washington. Patty was on that team. And that is to help you look at your formation programs and to say, do you have these practices that invite people to pray, to learn, to serve, to give, and to share? Those are the 5 core practices. But it helps you do those for each age group, letting you know what are the key questions for children and youth and adults. Those resources in the back table on the left. And you can also find those resources at www.edow.org/path, P-A-T-H. We're learning to make things simple. Okay, as simple as we can, right? Now, another question. Choice 3 is across the way, okay? Now for lunch.
All right, so for lunch today, first I want to give a huge props to Cocineros, which is a local restaurant. They gave us, I love their food, and they gave us an amazing deal for today. They are neighbors to San Mateo, and so they were all about helping us out. So for those of you who can eat steak and chicken and are vegetarian, you are going to proceed back through the kitchen where Sue is pointing. Sue and Joymel are pointing. You're going to go through the kitchen, grab your burrito bowl, circle around, grab chips and salsa, and come back out. This will help create a decent flow. Last year, it was a little bit like herding cats. So we are streamlining processes. So those of you who don't have really any dietary issues or who are vegetarian, you're going to circle through the kitchen. If you are vegan or gluten-free, you are going to go to that table back there where Sue and Joymel are pointing now for Soul Spice, which is one of our favorite gluten-free, certified gluten-free facilities that we often use. So if you have any questions about allergy stuff, come see me. But otherwise, those are our food options. You have until 12:15 for lunch. Yeah, spread out. Don't feel free to go sit outside. It's lovely out, and especially in the shade. So before we go, I'd like to offer us a prayer. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for this day to be together, to share in dialogue and learning with one another as we venture forward in this 3-year journey. We ask your blessings on this second year, that it may continue to help our congregations become more fruitful and abundant in all they do. We ask that you bless this food to our bodies, bless the hands that prepared it and the places from which it came, those who harvested and planted. May it nourish our bodies for the rest of this day. All of these things we pray in your most holy name. Amen. Let's eat. Oh, last thing too, San Mateo provided fruit cocktail punch, which is also on the beverage table back there. You may remember that from last year. Top notch. Have at it.